Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing good and are safe. My name is Priyanka. I am a UX researcher and trainer at UXExpert. I welcome you all to today's UX Talk. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, a true design thinker, Karen Zeigler. Ever since she was a little kid, she had been driven by the desire to make things better, faster, and easier for people to accomplish their goals. She could see their struggles clearly and wanted to help. She realized later in her life that this knack of deconstructing and reconstructing an improved result is the process of design thinking and a hallmark of an innovator, and it's something that she really loved. And hence, she has been doing what she loves for more than 20 years now. She loves supporting leaders in improving performance, creating efficient process, and reaching their goals better, faster, and easier with a human-centered approach to identifying and solving the problems hindering their potential. She assists C-suite leaders, line of business executives, and business owners in improving performance, increasing morale, and boosting employee engagement. And today, she is going to speak with us about the future of leadership that is leading by design. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Priyanka. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, before Karen speaks, we also have Mr. Tushar Deshmukh here. I would like to give a little introduction of him as well, as he has created this amazing platform for us. So UX Expert is one of the top 10 user experience service provider companies in India, and Tushar is the founder and CEO of the UX Expert. He is also the director of UXUITrainingLab, which provides professional training in human-computer interaction, usability, user psychology, user research, prototyping tools, and front-end development in various languages. And Tushar is working towards many more courses related to UX to be launched soon. Through this platform, he is not only training people but also provides job as well as entrepreneurship opportunities to his students. He is a visiting professor at Symbiosis Institute of Design and has given speeches at various other conferences. He has been working in this field for more than 18 years, and he has worked as developer, designer, researcher almost every phase of the product development. He is a director at Amplify Reach and works as a UX consultant for various other companies. He is also founder of Organize My Hotel. So now before I hand it over to Tushar, I request you all to please keep your devices on mute and turn off your video for the entire session. And thank you. So Tushar, could you please take it over?
Sure. Thank you, Priyanka. Uh, Welcome, Karen, once again.
Yes, thank you.
It was pleasure you to have on this beautiful topic on UX talk. So before we move on actual topic, just give me just 2 minutes to explain our new audience also what is UX talk is all about, and then we will start our core topic, what everybody is gathered here. So basically, UX Talk is a platform where my vision is to bring all expertise on the same platform. And slowly, it was started as a addressing Indian audience, but I'm happy it is now we are having very global audience also, and slowly UX Talk becomes global brand. So I'm happy with that. Uh, and end of the day, all designers should speak same language. That was the main core idea about this entire UX talk. Now, as we have lot of subjects in pipeline, and we are scheduled to good topics and good speaker in next henceforth also. So keep watch on UX dot website, and keep also connected on LinkedIn so that you will keep update on about this UX talks and next sessions which we are planning. Okay. this thing for introduction about UX talk. And now let's come to today's topic. That is, what we are. Karen is here for, and she is giving us a valuable time for us, for our community as a design community. Uh, and again, I'm thanks. And let's start. So, before we start on a core subject, just I would like to, uh, you just tell us your own little bit about your journey and what makes you to become a design thinker, because I believe everyone's journey is very much inspirational for everyone. So just few minutes for them, then we actually move on our core topic.
Ah, my journey. Wow. Well, I took the long route to design thinking. Um, I was designing in the leadership realm over 20 years ago, before I even realized what design thinking was. Tackling in the financial industry at the time, mergers and acquisitions, and taking underperforming teams and turning them around through the process of design thinking. And I didn't realize it at the time. It just seemed like an intuitive way to manage, because at the time I was in my 20s and did not know a lot about leadership and managing people. And so tapping into the resources, which was my teams at the time, who had been in banking and had done their jobs for many years, just seemed like a natural. And so what I've come to know as user research was what I was doing back in those days. And that took me through a decade of going through mergers and acquisitions, taking multiple teams and bringing them together, low performing teams and bringing them up to high performing teams, from the newest of branches at the time in new communities to the largest branch in the state of Florida, which I'm here in Florida in the US. And from there, I moved on to financial advising. I wanted to raise my family, and that gave me a lot more freedom than management did at the time. But I still carried with me the tools of design thinking, even in that sales role, because I was dealing with a long cycle sales of financial investments to the wealthy. And so there was a team of advisors I was working with, their attorneys, their accountants, their estate trustees, and so forth. And so I really had to use those skills again to, research, do the user research, define the problems that the client was experiencing, coming up with the ideation of what's going to best serve them, prototyping and testing on a quarterly basis. And so as I finished a decade in that career, I began to move into the nonprofit to do some bucket list items and put the skills to work again in a new environment, more creating an educational program for a volunteer base in a charitable organization. So it's always been in some form or fashion of leading a team, what the objectives and the results of that team varied over the decades. But it's always been about bringing team performance up and making it cohesive, making it results oriented, and really just enlivening the team to perform at their very best and bringing out the greatest potential in the team. Couple of years ago, I was kind of, I don't know, one of those life splits in the road where I'm trying to determine what I'm going to do with the second half of my journey. And I discovered through Simon Sinek, which many of you may have read, his book, Start with the Why, kind of what I called a track that my brain runs on. And so I decided I was going to create a consulting practice around that track. And so as I began to look into how to write about that, because I'd been writing for the last 10 years, what I discovered was that track that my brain runs on was design thinking. And so I went and got my credentials, and a lot of things come to light from my history in studying it. I could see clearly where mistakes were made from what I learned new. And so that's where this journey began. And yeah.
Yes, that is great. Great. So design thinking, a lot of things, there are a lot of misunderstandings. People think only it is about tools sometimes. Maybe people think about only it is a IT process. So there is a lot of confusion between upcoming generations.
Yeah.
Though we know where it is evolved, but while implementing, there's a lot of issues. So just we can begin with just we can you can give us an audience just overview about what is design thinking, just high level, some,
Yes.
and then we can take from next here.
Yes. Just in case anyone isn't aware of the 5 steps of the design thinking process, there is 5 steps. The first one is called empathy, which I tend to label user research, though there is a lot of empathy and listening in there. The second one is defining the problem. The third is ideation. The fourth is prototyping, and the last is testing. Now, traditionally, design thinking has been used for the innovation of products, then it's evolved to the innovation of services, and it's evolving further still to the innovation of leadership and organizations, business models, and such. So that is kind of the high level of design thinking. It's been used for decades from some of the top firms, Apple, Toyota, some other firms that you would recognize, but it was more kind of their secret sauce. But I didn't look up the date, but not that long ago, colleges began teaching it in their curriculum, and it began getting more mainstream attention in the business world. And so I believe it's just beginning to escalate in its approach and use to management. In fact, I believe it was Gartner Consulting that produced some research that said design thinking is the #1 out of the top 10 skills that C-suites are looking for right now in the last 3 years. And that has grown to over 174%, that increase. And what I love about their research, and it is shared on my LinkedIn page a ways down, but there are 10 items on that list, from strategy development to execution to IT. There's a number of things that are on that top 10 list of Gartner's research, design thinking being the #1, but it is the only skill on the list that actually has the capacity to impact every other skill. So the value is tremendous, whether it's product innovation, service innovation, IT, the IT world, or management as a whole. But today I want to talk specifically to the leadership aspect of it, because I do believe innovation in products and services is just one realm of design thinking. It's the physical realm. There's much more depth to it than that.
So when you say as a leadership, right? So what you look at what is this main, how the leader basically you think at it, your views, what it constitutes, and what makes the
Yeah.
leader? Yeah.
Leadership is very simple. If you are responsible for a team, and that team could be as small as 3 people, as large as a corporation. But if you are a leader responsible for bringing together a group of people towards a goal, then that is what I consider to be a leader. And as I mentioned in my role as a financial advisor, a leader doesn't even necessarily have to be all internal. For instance, supply chain and marketing and other departments within a company, they may have internal partners and external partners that make up their team that they work with. So the team doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't have to be the boss of them, but you have to be leading them in some effort.
And now as our core audience is also from design background. So
Yeah.
now even our topic is also lead by design. So just we can tell more elaborate about and some scenarios we can help us to understand how designers could be and apply this design thinking, and what the role you are thinking and how they become this in a leadership in that sense.
Sure. So for the designer, say, that's used to doing it in the IT function, I want you to forget a moment about the systems that you're working with, and perhaps even the user being the client that you're working with to solve that problem. The user now becomes your employees, and the goal that you are trying to achieve is going to be determined by that group. Now, you may cast the vision question. If you're familiar with design thinking, you know that it always starts with a vision question: how might we? Well, you know, in the IT world, and I do not speak as anyone knowledgeable at all in that area, it may be about, you know, making systems talk together or pass data the way it's supposed to be. But in the leadership world, your how might we might be, how might we, you know, excel at this metric, whatever the metric is. I'll use sales because that's an example that I'm familiar with. So if I were going into a team that was not performing well on their sales goals, you know, my question to them, my vision question to them is: how might we increase our sales performance? And then, you know, as all user research does, you go into what's working, what's not working, how can we make it better? And so that is where it starts. It starts with the team itself. They are your users. And what is the vision that you're trying to accomplish with that team? That is the how might we. So that vision is going to look different whether you're in a marketing department or, say, a sales department or an accounting department. The vision is going to look different, but you're always going to start with the how might we, and then you're going to look to your user, which is your team, to begin to define that problem and ideate and so forth down the line.
So my next question will be then, what are the, you know, see, there are typical processes the IT follows, and in IT companies, what we see in India, I think everywhere, people are, many times they follow their own processes like agile and everything, that kind of a thing. And many times the people argue, you know, why should use uh, one extra process which causes the design thinking in my product. So just you know, in that sense, what is the advantage being designer as a leader, and in that case, the design thinking, how they can benefit out of this?
Well, and this can be a lengthy conversation, but every aspect of the design thinking process has leadership qualities and abilities to develop within it. For instance, the empathy and listening stage. That is the bedrock of trust, which trust is the bedrock of leadership. So if you look at the design thinking process as a way to strengthen your leadership from the get-go, whether what you're trying to accomplish succeeds or fails, you will begin to establish trust through the listening and empathy process. Defining the problem. Specifically, just as an example, using the sales analogy again, generally if a sales team is not performing and the metrics or whatever are showing the results are poor, in a traditional environment, the leader's going to look at the numbers and go, okay, Susie and John, their numbers are low, they're the problem. And they're going to try and fix those problems, or they're going to get rid of them. That's how that goes. And so you end up churning employees. But with design thinking, first of all, you never assume what the problem is. You let the users define the problem. And so you begin to take the, what's the term I would use? Take the stigma from the employee to transition them from being the problem to being the solution to the problem. And that in and of itself elevates the mindset, the belief in success, the belief in themselves, the belief in their ability to contribute in ways beyond just selling another widget or whatever it is their function may be. And so when you begin to divine the problem in these scenarios, even though your vision is about the metrics, say increasing performance, when you define the problem, you may find out that it is other things beyond that. It could be training, it could be suppliers that are slow, it could be a number of things that are affecting their ability to do the job and meet the metric. And so then, so defining the problem really switches the focus from the employees being the problem to the employees being the solution, which is a huge leadership jump for organizations and for teams and for the employee experience. All of a sudden, rather than feeling beat down in their day's work, they feel lifted up and empowered to begin to solve the problem and have an impact in a different way, rather than just, you know, do more of whatever it is they have to do in their job. Unlike design thinking, say in the innovation or the IT world, the user in the leadership role, the user is really involved all the way through the process. So in the traditional sense, after the problem is defined, then ideation and all that just happens in the design team. This, however, would happen within the team that you're working with. And so you would prioritize what those problems were that you identified in, and then you would either have it as a whole team, or you may even break it out into smaller sub-teams to begin to ideate and come up with solutions that you can prototype. This is different than traditional ideation in, say, IT or product innovation, in that you're going to generally set constrictions to it. You know, it's what the problems are and the company resources that are available to you can create. For instance, when I was doing it initially in banking center management, you know, we were in the middle of merger, we were merging teams, we were getting new systems. Cuts were a high priority because they needed, you know, to man the budget and get their expenses met. So we had no budget. There was no budget. So we were able to, you know, bring up the results with what we had and make the adjustments. And those can be simple things. They're a lot simpler in the leadership realm than it is in, say, product innovation, because it could be a schedule, it could be a process, it could be, you know, a number of small things that you tweak within, you know, how you train them. It could be that. There are a number of things that cost little to nothing that can be adjusted in a team structure to have an impact. And even the smallest of impact, because the employees were seen as the solution, because they were brought in from the beginning, they get excited and they begin to work harder even on the things that didn't change, because they feel a part of something bigger than they did before. And prototyping and testing is really just trying out those adjustments, you know, putting them in place, trying them out, and going back and forth. And I think one last thing, and it's not the last thing, there's many, but the great thing about it in the prototyping and testing and having to ideate again and again, you know, it really, failure, it takes away the stigma of failure. And you see the true essence, I would say, of the individual and what they're capable of. Now, you may discover in the process that the role they're in is not a good fit for them. I'm not saying I never fired anyone. I fired plenty of people back then, but it's with a lot more dignity, because they were part of a solution. They weren't the problem. And through the ideation, prototyping, and testing phases, they began to learn and see where their gifts were and where they weren't. And so if it comes to firing them in the end, or maybe putting them into a different role, they already understand, because they know, they see for themselves what they're good at and what they're not. And the firing, if it happens, comes as no surprise, because they know that the role they're in is not the role that they are gifted for. So it gives a whole different, I guess, dignity, sense of integrity, sense of empowerment to employees, versus just being a pawn on a game, a chess game, if that makes sense.
So now coming, that was great insight about this what different as what as a leader as design. But keeping in that context, can you just tell us what are the different types of scenarios will any design professional will see, and those design scenarios will leading to them as for their appropriate for their as a leaders.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned three that I've been involved in throughout my history: sales management, then sales as an individual, then volunteer education and development. Those are three, but I believe, any team that has a vision, whether it be a metric or just something they want to accomplish, which is why this is so successful in the startup world. Any team that has a vision, has a metric that they're looking to accomplish, and perhaps are falling far shorter than they know they have the potential to create, can implement this. That can be marketing, that can be accounting, IT, obviously. So I really see it as unlimited from the leadership perspective. It's going to look slightly different depending on what department you're in or what business you're running, because the ideation, prototyping, and testing is going to look different than the traditional product innovation. But the process can really begin to allow you to elevate your performance and whatever that looks like. And that's why I think I shared with you an image. I don't know if you have it to share, but I see design thinking as a foundation of leadership principles in an organization. It's the principles, it's the foundation. The next part of that image is UX, which is how it works and how it looks. And then the last part, that's UI, and the last part is UX, the experience of the end user. I see that not only as how innovative companies are structured with kind of the org chart flipped upside down, but I also see that those three things happening in every team. The leaders of the team being the design thinkers, and the leaders of the process. There's going to always be someone on the team that's about how it works and what it looks like. And there's likely someone skilled in the gift of how do we make this the best experience possible for our user. Because users are going to be different for every department. The accounting user, it could be the CEO, it could be, the CFO, marketing, it could be the employees, it could be the customers. But that same triad of design thinking, leader, UX, and UI are embedded in every team. And it's just discovering that is the fun part and part of what elevates the success of the team.
So, see, because for long time I am also, as a design head, I have worked. Then my career started as junior designer, then senior designer, then ultimately design head. Some year I was work because of my technical background. I also work as a CTO, and now as a CEO of a company and everything. But so there is always a distinction between we see as a designer become a leader and the typical people which come from a management side. So now the management trainings, the people they took about their management degrees and everything. So where you see the difference between and how any designer, because there is a lot of things to be learned as a management side also and project level also. So we have to keep balance between where we can address our customers. We have to keep in-house team also happy, and end of the day or end user, there is customers also happy. So where you see this distinction between the leader who come from a design as a design leader, and the typical we have like a managers and other coaches. So where we are means as a designer, where you are looking at that.
Well, to me, the primary distinction between, say, an individual working as a designer and a leader that also happens to design is leadership is solely about responsibility. And one thing that I see in leadership historically is that leaders forget that they have two responsibilities. The goal is just one. The people are the other. And the traditional way of leading is you push the people to perform the goal. The design thinking way of leadership is you work with the people to achieve the goal, and you collaborate. It's a collaboratory environment. I believe it was Rumi. It may not. It's kind of a spiritual quote that applies to leadership, in my opinion. But there's a quote that goes something like, "If you want to find love, remove all the roadblocks to love." In leadership, if you want to meet the goal, remove all the roadblocks to the goal. And that is where the team comes in. That is where applying design thinking to the unit of the team comes in. Because when you remove all the obstacles that your team is facing, the goal becomes, quite frankly, pretty darn easy.
That was a great answer. See, so just we can now, I think there are a lot of questions are also coming in chat window.
Sure.
But see, before we come on open floor for our participants, uh, just I can if you just help out us to what are the benefits in this for applying this design leadership in there as a leader, and next will be what are the challenges in we are facing, and specific in that if you just point out some your thoughts on after COVID situations, and where we are going towards, and because there are a lot of changes are happened in design teams, and what kind of projects we are coming after COVID. So there is a
Sure.
huge aspects about that also. So that will be my I think next question will be so what are the benefits, and what are the challenges, and last part will be the what are the after COVID things what is your
Sure.
takeaways in
Sure. Well, gosh, this could be a whole program in and of itself, but
yes.
if you look at, and I've in studying the challenges and fears of CEOs, I do believe even if you're not a CEO, if you're leading a team, you likely have some of these same fears. You may not express them as fears, but they are certainly underneath the surface and driving a lot of what you do. There's the fear of failure. There's the fear of looking like a fool. There's the fear of not leaving a good legacy as a leader, of being ridiculed and judged. All those things are very ego-based. And ego is really probably the greatest obstacle leadership entails, and I am not exempt from that, I can tell you. But the process of design thinking does a lot, especially the more you practice it, to alleviate those issues, because the burden is lifted from the leader to know everything, to do everything, to be everything. And they realize pretty quickly that it is a team effort. And if they're not already of that mindset, now, the greatest leaders and the greatest companies already have that mindset. And that's actually, quite frankly, why they're great in the first place, because they know that it's not them that accomplished that. They just cast the vision and led the way. And that's the great thing about design thinking. It starts with casting the vision and letting the employees lead the way, or the team.
I think so today's our topic, design as a leader, and design thinking is because I believe there are a lot of people, we as a designer have a lot of misunderstanding about design thinking. So many times in a IT world, we basically end of the day, we everything we link to the screens, to the UI and to the UX. Okay, because ultimately we see, okay, design. If I use design thinking as a design process, my screens will be more something better. So, okay, but I think hope that misunderstanding many people here also, and in future maybe that idea is about what exactly is a design thinking. That I think a lot of things are clear pretty much. I think you have book also, right? So just we can help out the name for our audience, because some of people are asking about book name about, uh, so that thing you can help. And second thing, that before we open floor to the question answer, to the audience, that I believe we have you have like a, design thinking program also, and we are, I think, coming together and we are launching soon that program to our audience, so that people will know correctly, know what is design thinking, as
Sure.
specifically in Indian audience we are going to. So just we can just few minutes we can, just we can talk about that thing, then we can open floor. And probably I
Sure.
think we are planning probably in October, middle of October, as per our dates and everything. We'll start. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. As for a book, there is no book published as of yet. It is actually in the making. So for those that follow UX Talks and will follow me, that will certainly be happening, and you'll see that when that happens. But for now, I guess it's all in my head, which there's so many things there. It's a dangerous
Sure.
place.
Sure.
But to talk about the course, for me, in delivering this course, having gone through a design thinking training myself, um, what I think is the distinction between if you went out and you took any design thinking course that you could find, which there are many great ones, and even the one I took I think was excellent. For me, the difference is the experiential factor, in that the course that I am offering or will be offering in October, it is more than just teaching you the process of design thinking. It is experiential in that I want you to come to the sessions, not only to learn, but then to take it back and teach it and practice it. So, for instance, it's going to be about 8 sessions long. And in the second session, we are going to teach empathy. So, and what that means and what that looks like from a leadership perspective. So, after the second session, you'll go back to your team and you will do that user research for the vision that you've identified at the beginning of the class. So it's going to be really hands-on, experiential lessons. And so when you come back in the third session, we're going to break down what your experiences were. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go well? Coach you through some things that may help you going forward. Coach you through some of the things you learned and how it applies to the next part that we will teach, which is defining the problem. So it's going to be very much learn, do, share, be coached, and repeat. For companies that the classes are going to be live and they're going to be limited to 7 individuals per class. For companies that choose to purchase the whole class so that they can have 7 of their leaders come together to learn the process and implement it on their teams, then that particular group will also have the benefits of consulting. So not only will I teach them and coach them, and they will learn from each other, but we'll also do consulting work in that group on the problem that particular 7 group of leaders is addressing. So the bigger vision.
Hopefully, that your knowledge and everything will get benefit for our professionals. Very soon,
Sure.
we are planned. Okay. Now, just Priyanka, you can help out on questions. I think there are a couple of questions already on chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I think Anastasia has asked, while working on a team, it might be not every member has the same level of design thinking, which sometimes lead them to not giving more innovative ideas. So what could a leader do to make the team has the same frequency of design thinking?
Well, first of all, I think that's a great question. And, you know, I guess at the time that I was first implementing leadership by design, I didn't know it was in terms of a tool, a mindset or a process like design thinking. So I really didn't impart that to everyone on the team. What I did do was in the user research, I began to ask them, okay, this is the vision we have for raising performance in X area. You know, what's working about that, what's not working, and how would you improve it? And when we got to the discussions about how you would improve it, I really began to dig into them as individuals and talk about, you know, in looking at these things, specifically how you would improve it, what role do you want to play in that? And because sometimes the things that get tackled in a design thinking team effort are different than the goal itself, you know, like say sales was what you were trying to raise, but part of the problem was training, and they, you know, that was flushed out through all the user things. So you ask them, what role do you want to play? And if someone has a gift for teaching or a gift for research or a gift for something else that goes into training, then those are the things they're going to get excited about, and that's the part they bring to the solution. So they don't necessarily have to have a design thinking mindset. I mean, obviously, if they are in their roles are turning around and doing that for customers or for other users, then you definitely want to educate them. But to me, as a team leader, and part of the way I want to structure when I go into companies to do this, to create innovative cultures, is when you train a group of leaders and then they in turn not only go back and practice it, but also train the next group of leaders down, that is where you really solidify the training. That can go from the CEO all the way down to the frontline clerks, because each time you learn it, you do it, you teach it, it just cements that knowledge in your psyche even further, for those that may not be naturally inclined to think that way.
We have another question from Rakesh. He wants to know what are the differences or similarities between design thinking methodologies and the conventional UX approach. I think I read your article the other day. It was about the agile process and design thinking. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people usually, have problem with what is agile. So like, could you please like elaborate on those three terms?
Sure. And if you like, I can put the link to that article in the chat, but I can give you this story that I taught in that post. And basically the metaphor that came to me when I was thinking about what I knew about Agile, which I can tell you is about this much, and what I know about design thinking, which is a lot more, the image that came to me was lab rats. You know, in a medical lab where they're testing things. The problem of the rats was they were bored. There was nothing to do. They were, you know, rats are normally curious, playful animals, but they were bored in their little boxes, not having anything to explore or do. And so the hamster wheel just gave them more of the same. It gave them activity for a little bit, but it did not quench their need for curiosity, their need for play. And so I contrasted Agile would look at the problem that you have, and design thinking looks at the problem that the user has. And that's the difference. And from a personal perspective, as a leader, I find when we focus on the problem, our problem, you know, like say sales, you know, performance stinks, that's our problem. We end up solving a problem, much like the lab technicians, that ends up creating more problems or the same problem emerges again. It's a self-sabotaging path. But when you set the vision and you solve for the vision, which by its very nature dissolves the problems, removes them, because you can't get to the vision without removing the problems, then that sets you on a straighter course, if that makes any sense. So I can put the link to that article if you'd like, but before we leave, or I'll share it on my page, whatever's easier. But that's the distinction between agile and design thinking. And even not just agile, but the traditional way of looking at problems when it comes to teams. We focus on the problem and not necessarily on the vision. And that gets us off the path of where we want to go.
And what about the traditional UX methods?
Having only applied design thinking in leadership roles, I don't know that I'm the expert to address UX. Perhaps that's a conversation I can have with some UX people and learn myself.
All right. We have another question from Anjal, and she wants to know, how can design thinking effectively help when you are working in an NGO where you essentially work for a social cause?
Could you repeat the question?
She wants to know, how can you apply the design thinking process when you're working for a social cause with an NGO?
With an end user?
NGO, that is like if you're working for a non-profit organization.
Okay, NGO. Yes. And actually, the one thing that we didn't discuss is there are 3 pillars of design thinking that kind of permeate all the 5 phases. And if you think of, you can't have a table without at least 3 legs. If you take one of those 3 legs away, it will not stand. Design thinking has that. You hear them called pillars, you hear them called principles, but basically there's 3 questions. And I think, and I've made this mistake, by the way, in working for a nonprofit, so I can attest to this one publicly, that you got to make sure you meet these 3. And they are, is it desirable? Is it feasible? Is it viable? And desirable means the end user, who you are helping with your cause, do they want the help? Sometimes we assume, why would they not? But due to conditioning, trauma, a number of different things, there are reasons why people don't necessarily want the help, or they don't even know they need the help because of the level of existence they've experienced in their lives thus far. So it's important to know, do that user research. Is it desirable? Do they want that help? Perhaps it's 2 steps back from the help that you're trying to give them. You know, you never know. It could be education that you start out with, but not knowing the cause she's talking about, it's hard to address it. The other is feasible and viable. Feasible meaning, can you deliver what it is you need to for the user? In a corporation setting, and even in a nonprofit, that goes to technologies, employees, processes. Do you have what it takes to deliver what they need? So that's the second question. The last one, is it viable? I think nonprofits know better than anyone else that without sustainable income, whether that's gifts, donations, or whatever, you cannot sustain a not-for-profit. And that's why the not-for-profit model has moved so far from just getting donations to now most companies even have a cause where you have a product you're selling or a service you're selling so that the income is there and you don't have to wait on donations in order to do the good work that you want to do. So the viable is very important. But all 3 of those, if you address all 3 of those and then apply the 5 steps of design thinking, then you can run a successful nonprofit organization.
Another question from Siddesh. He says that he is pretty new to the design thinking, and he has an abstract idea of it. But he has asked if you could explain it with a practical application.
Practical application, design thinking as in for a product, a service, or as leadership? Because we've gone quite into a number of ways to apply it to leadership. What type of business is Sadish do?
Dish, would you like to elaborate it?
Okay.
He says
He's
he's working on a startup. Yeah.
Is his startup a product or a service?
Startup, I think. He is talking about startup, a product.
Product.
Okay. All right. You're selling a widget, right? When you are going through the design thinking process, well, it depends on where the widget is. The widget sale, it really depends a lot on where the widget sales are in the product cycle. You know, is it just a matter of consumers not knowing about the product, or is it the product's been out there a while and people aren't attracted to it? But basically, we'll just say you have a new product, and for whatever reason you believed it to be something that they needed. The few that you spoke with said it was a good idea, but now it's time to really make sure that that's a good idea. And so user research, which would be the first step, the listening, the empathy phase, would be talking to as many people who are in the market for that product, have purchased that product, or even if, say, it's a brand new idea, whoever the target market is. So it would be interviewing those individuals and asking them, you know, when it comes to a product that delivers this, what's working for you, what's not working for you, how would you like to see that improve? When it's brand new, you really need to know what's their likelihood of buying, what's their likely, you know, how often would they need it? There's a lot of factors in that, but you can't talk to too many people. I mean, the more people that you speak with, especially those that have the target audience that you are looking to reach, the more you're going to learn. The more you can learn from the potential clients, the better your product is going to be, the better your company is going to be, because not only will your product be better, but the service behind it will be better, because you'll be delivering on the needs of the user. And that's just phase one. So, you know, from there, we go to defining the problem and etc.
I think research is I think fundamental basic for every process we need. Okay, we'll take just a couple of questions, and I think we have a lot of discuss now. I think we should, because Karen, you have to take time for that. Yeah, Priyanka, we have some questions.
Yeah, I think we have another question. What do you think about design ops in the context of similar as agile and DevOps, and how a design leader should approach it? Is it a right thing to create very rigid process for experience design?
Well, addressing the last part, experience design, when you're designing experience, it really has to be determined by the user. So while the process may be structured, just like design thinking is very structured, the outcome is never cookie cutter, if that makes sense. You know, it's like design thinking is a foundation. What you build on that foundation could look 100 different ways. If you think of the example of a house, the foundation has certain qualifications, certain things that you need to meet. That's design thinking process. It's a foundation. Without that solid foundation, you're going to build a structure and it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be feasible or viable. because the foundation is weak. That's why design thinking puts listening at the beginning, the middle, and the end, because unless we're listening to what the user wants, unless we're involving them in the process, they don't care. They don't care that you've covered all 5 steps. You can check those boxes all day long, but if you didn't hear what they were saying, then you're not going to build a house or design a product or create an environment for a team that they want to be a part of. And that's what you want. You want people to be attracted to what it is you're doing, what it is you're selling, your leadership, whatever it is. You want them to be there because they want to be there, because they feel like they have something to contribute, whether it, that's why communities are so big in products right now. People don't just want to sell their products anymore. They want to build communities around their products, because people want to be part of things that they deem are exciting, that they identify with, that they see as a reflection of who they believe themselves to be.
Yeah, I think.
Another, can we take a few more questions?
Sure. I'm fine as long as Tushar is good.
Yeah, I'm fine. No. We'll take a couple of.
I'm sure it's getting late there in India. It's early here for me, so I'm good.
No problem. No.
Okay. So Michael has asked if you could explain the other steps of the design thinking as well with a practical example.
From a design leadership perspective, not necessarily product or service innovation. The second phase, defining the problem, it's about synthesizing what you learned in your empathy phase, the first step. So you're synthesizing all the data that you took in from your team. So in phase 1, you talk to the team about the vision. How might we improve performance? What's working, what's not working? How can we make it better? Part 2, you begin synthesizing. It's almost like sifting. If you've sifted flour or sifted, I don't know what else you sift, but you're sifting for what are the big chunks of stuff that stood out in all of those interviews, because those become your priority. Those become the crux of the problem that you're trying to solve. In the performance issue, it could have come down to training, a particular process that your team uses that needs to be adjusted, or perhaps supplier information. So then you look at that, and the part about leading by design, you can go back to your users, which is your team at that point, and say, okay, well, I've listened to all of you. Here are the common threads and what I see as the problem. And then you'll get the affirmation right there that, oh yes, that is the primary problem. Those are the things we need to tackle in order to get to that vision that we're looking for. And so that's to define the problem phase. Ideation goes to, okay, these are the problems that we're solving. These are the resources that we can apply to it, whether it's financial, people, systems, whatever. That's the construct in which we need to design the solution. So as I said, that can be as little as a 0 budget, or that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars when you're talking about product innovation, or perhaps initiating a new system in a corporation. It really just depends. From there, the ideation goes to prototyping, and prototyping is really taking the best of the solutions to testing within the team. And then that circle of prototyping and testing is just seeing which of those ideas work and which do not. And, when you're dealing with people, nothing is ever stationary. So you may go through that design thinking process in 6 months. Maybe something changes within your company, or changes within the team itself. And so you may have to go through that again to say, okay, this changed, and so it affected the way we were doing this. Let's start again with how do we go for this vision. And so it's a perpetual process. It never ends, because people, systems, everything is always changing. And that's why in the post I shared about leading as a manager, leading as a coach, and leading as a designer. That's why I really feel that leading as a designer is the way of the future, because as we've seen with COVID and as we experience even prior to COVID, things rarely stay the same anymore. You know, back in the industrial age, you just had to produce a widget and that was it. All I needed was your body to show up. In the information age, we tapped into their minds, but that was it. They were still just churning out product, which at that time changed from a physical card to information. Now it's more about experience, and that's making the individual, whether it's the employee or the ultimate user, the client, come alive, to fall in love with what they're doing, their jobs, your product, your service, the people as individuals. So
User psychology specifically.
yeah,
Yeah.
from my own experience and my my studies of design thinking, there's not a particular psychology associated with it. I think psychology certainly plays a role in it. You really, I guess an overarching psychology it has to be human-centered, meaning the person in front of you is who you're serving. You're no longer serving yourself as a leader or the company and its products for profit. You're serving the person before you. And it comes down to what are their needs. And that's why listening is so important, because if you do not listen, you do not know their needs. And I wrote a post in my listening challenge, which I'll share with everyone after this, about how I feel that Steve Jobs listened. He wasn't just asking questions. He was asking questions. He was observing. He was saying, you know, what are they saying? What are the observations saying? What's not being said? And then what is the need? For instance, I gave the example, back before he invented the iPhone, people were walking around with boom boxes on their shoulder, right? To listen to their music while they walked, or they had the run man on their hip. He may have overheard someone talking on their cell phone saying, you know, hey, I have that in the file. When I get back to the office, I'll call you with that information. He was taking all that in. It wasn't necessarily what he saw or what they said. He was going, what is not being said here? And then what is the need behind what is not being said? What was not being said was people love to have their music with them. And there's not a way to do that. And so he delivered a way to do that. What was being said is, you know, I want to serve my clients. I just don't have the information I need with me to serve my clients right here where I'm at. How do we get that information where it's available to them right then? So listening and understanding the user is more than just asking questions and listening to what they say. You have to listen to what they don't say. And then you have to, between the two of those things, understand what is the need that they don't know. Because Steve Jobs, his quote about, I don't ask users what they need because they don't know. If I'd asked someone if they what they wanted when we were riding horses, they would have said a faster horse. That's the point. It's not that you don't ask, and it's not that you don't observe and listen. It's that you have to dig deeper, and it's really an intuitive process to dig deeper into what those needs are, because they don't know. I mean, they may go, I want a faster horse, but okay, take the horse out of it. How do we get them there faster?
I think that was great. Yeah. Priyanka, I think we take a last
Great.
question. And,
So one last question.
Jessica
Yeah.
has one question.
Yeah, so it's from Jessica, and she has asked, like, she wants to know, she is a mom, and as she's a mom of 4 children, and 3 of which still live at home and are teenage boys in different grade levels. They are doing homeschool this year due to the pandemic, and I am also an entrepreneur of 2 businesses. How could you apply design thinking to trying to engage your children into their learning process and education?
Yeah. That's a wonderful question, and it absolutely can be applied to that. I can tell you that my journey in this career has applied this on my own personal level throughout. And, you know, it really starts with the question. And maybe that question for her is, how do we make learning interesting for her children and let them be a part of that process? But you really have to come up with the vision question. And then it comes down to, again, listening to their needs and understanding that you have, you know, they say, well, maybe I don't want to they don't want to learn. Well, obviously that's not an option. Just like when we show up for work, it's not an option that we don't want to work today, right? But what we want to do is tap into what makes them excited about learning. And that may be observing more than it is asking. You want to get to, you know, what about, and each of those boys' personalities are going to be different. I would recommend, especially since they're teenage boys, diving into their personality types. You can learn a lot about them as individuals from that. And then observation, learning what excites them. You really have to intuitively pay attention to what makes an individual light up versus what makes them just like, oh gosh, not this again. There's a distinct difference, and understanding what that is key. It's key in managing employees. It's key in, you know, helping children thrive in their environment as well.
Great. I think that was actually,
Great,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, sure. Yeah, Priyanka,
It was a
now.
great answer. Okay. Thank you, Karen.
Yes.
It was a great session, and thank you, Tushar, for arranging such session for us. So I think we will wind up the session now, and I would also like to announce that we have our next talk, which is going to be on 26th of September, and Mr. Aditya Kulkarni, who is the founder of Amplify Reach and co-founder of Lemma Technologies, is going to speak on a very interesting topic, which is UX for conversational AI. So it's going to be as insightful as it was today. So I hope you all will join us for the session as well. And thank you, Karen, again for joining us today. It was a great.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, thank
thanks,
you. I
Karen.
thoroughly
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah, Karen. I think that was
Thank you.
really great, and I hope a lot of myths and misunderstanding about design thinking today people are understood. And I think what we are planning the course also, that soon we will come up, we'll post on LinkedIn, and let's see how many people are showing. And because a lot of people are really interested in learning core design thinking, and hopefully your knowledge, your expertise will bring, and we can give those knowledge, and you can bring a real design thinking in real world, because everybody should problem solver, that, and design should be leaders. And once again, thanks everybody for
Yeah.
joining today, and hope
Thank
we
you,
will,
everyone.
yeah, and just do follow on our this LinkedIn page for next activities. We are planning one great design thinking course. We will post out soon, and hopefully we will meet there for these wonderful sessions. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for time. Yeah.